Macroeconomics with chapter 23, section 1. So the big idea here is that free enterprise is the freedom of individuals and businesses to operate and compete with a minimum of government interference and regulation. So once more back to this idea of Adam Smith, that the invisible hand, that capitalism is a self-regulating system. In many ways, we still operate off of that same theory. And so some of the terms you'll see: private good versus public good, externality, meaning things that we try to account for. We'll talk about government interference in terms of antitrust laws and how monopolies were dealt with. And so even though we do operate in a free enterprise system, there are government regulations on that system. Now, the first question I want to ask is, does the government do a good job protecting private citizens from the negative effects of products? And again, it's an academic question that I just want you to consider as we're learning about this lesson. Is this something that we do a good job with? Is this something that voting someone else into office could change? Are the two classic theories of economics in terms of invisible hand versus government regulation? Which do you lean toward when it comes to private? And so first, let's look at public goods, like roads or even gas from a certain point of view. So public goods versus private. Now, if I'm a business and I'm making bread, I'm spending my own money to buy the flour, I'm using my own time to make the bread on a property that I personally own, a store or whatnot. And I'm making bread. It's a private good that I'm offering and selling, and you may choose or not to buy the product. And when it is consumed, say if I sell a loaf of bread to Jamie and he eats the loaf of bread, it's done. He is the end user. He can buy that loaf of bread and he can throw it on the street. I mean, sure, he'll hurt my feelings, but whatever. It's his bread. He can do whatever he wants with it. He can feed it to a dog. He can eat it. He can make it into a pizza. It's his business. He's the end user, and it cannot be consumed by another. He can't eat it and then resell it. That'd just be gross. And another type of good is called a public good. And a public good is an economic good that is consumed collectively. Roads are the classic example here. Say you're going to go to Asheville this afternoon, watch a movie, or go out to eat, or walk around the town and go shopping. You're going to drive on I-26. Interstate 26 has garnered attention at the national level. There are folks in Washington, D.C. right now trying to think about how to facilitate traffic along I-26. There have been millions of dollars of public resources, perhaps billions at this point, spent on that interstate that you can go and get on 5 minutes from here and complain about the traffic and pay nothing to use. And yet there are folks at the highest levels of transportation in our government that are thinking about that very road right now. That will cost you nothing to use. That's a public good that you can use, you cannot use. Personally, I like to avoid 26 when I can. And then again, national defense. Another of the classic examples of public good. The fact that you can drive on said road and assume a relative degree of safety and peace. That, Nazi zombies aren't going to be dropping out of planes and attacking you with whatever Nazi zombies used to attack you. I mean, you can live in relative comfort and peace and security, thanks to our national defense. Now, examples. Private goods, consumed once. And here's the thing. If I get on 26, I don't have to pay a dime. Now, granted, I got to pay for the car and the gas, et cetera, but in terms of using the road, it costs me nothing. But in terms of the bread, if I walk into Baker Bill's and I want to buy a loaf of bread, he's not just going to give me a loaf of bread if I make a puppy dog face. You can't run a business off puppy dog faces. Now, granted, it might work once. You might go, okay, whatever. But it's not a sustainable way to do business. And so if I'm unwilling to pay, I don't get bread. We all understand that. It's a private good. Food is a great example. I bought pizza yesterday for the family. If I hadn't gone by Domino's and bought said pizza, well, then I wouldn't have bought pizza. So clothes are another example. Clothes, of course, can be resold. Ashley loves buying clothes for Avery, so she bought him some cute boots. I was like, really? Does he need boots right now? But she wanted to buy him boots. So bought him boots, and the idea is that we're going to resell them. Well, it's our business. If she wanted to buy said boots and then throw them in the trash, that'd be wasteful, but hey, that's her right to do so. Again, it's a private good. Private services. Yeah, when I get my hair cut, I could, in theory, choose to never get a haircut. Well, the way my hair works, that would just get weird. But I could choose to never get a haircut. I'm going to eventually get one. I'm always lazy about it, but probably next week or so. Insurance. Another great example. Now, if you're going to drive a car, by law, you're required to purchase insurance. You have to, because if you hit someone else's vehicle and you have no way to pay, that hurts them. So if you're going to drive, by law, again, you have to buy it, but it's still a private good. Medical services. In theory, it's the same way. I could have chosen not to get my shoulder worked on. I'm glad I did, because now I'm getting better instead of progressively worse over time. But once more, it was a private decision that I had to make. Public good. These are goods shared by everyone. These are also goods the government provides. Many of you guys hit these examples. Libraries, roads. And I was thinking of libraries more of a service, but honestly, you could also think about it as a good in that it's a building. You use it. Books are certainly a good that once more are being used by the public. A park is a good. It's a space that was built that required capital, and now everyone can use it. Street lights, museums even. And how are these paid for? They're paid for by taxes. By you guys choosing to get good jobs, and in those jobs being required by law to pay taxes that provide for these public goods. Now, public goods produce externalities. These are unintended side effects. There can be good side effects. There can be bad side effects. And these can affect even people not involved. So, for example, roads provide a positive externality. Not only does the highway make it easier for you to get from place to place, it also makes the goods in the stores that we shop in cheaper, because the cost of shipping is directly related to the price of goods in a store. You ever thought about it this way? Anybody been up to the boondocks? Like my mother-in-law lives in Cashiers. We were up there for the holidays. And if you had to guess, would the price of gas be cheaper or more expensive in Cashiers? Yeah, because it's harder to get there. Gas is more expensive. Because if you go to Cashiers, you got to go on this windy road. It takes an hour from Brevard to get up there. It's a long ways up. And it's not near any interstate. It's at, the base elevation is 4,000 feet for a town. It's way up there. And so, because the cost of shipping is higher, the cost of goods in their stores is higher. We're right by the interstate. So, say you go get gas at Ingalls and Flat Rock, which is where I go a lot, that's about as cheap as you're going to find in this area. Why? Because it's right by the interstate. Okay, that's a positive externality for us in terms of transportation. Now, examples of public goods we talked about. Secondly, what role does government play in ensuring competition? You see, the government's actively involved in trying to protect us, not just from Nazi zombies or North Koreans or whatever, but they also try to protect us economically by making businesses play fair. So we've learned from American history that a monopoly is when an industry, when a company becomes the sole provider of that good or service, and they control that market. So what can the government do? Well, they can pass laws to try to preserve competition. You see, a monopoly represents the end of competition. If you're the only business providing that good or service, well, then you have no competition. And so if we can pass a law banning that type of business, then hopefully we can preserve the competition. And so the example that was given earlier was the Sherman Antitrust Act, passed in 1890, because the theory is that monopolies hurt competition. And capitalism is based on the idea that if there's more than one company making said product, it's going to inspire innovation, it's going to lead to competitive pricing, and it's going to be better for us, the consumer. And so we want competition. And so with mergers, the lack of competition allowed businesses holding the monopoly to charge any price they wanted. You know, for example, if there was only one company making laptops, that would really suck because they could charge theoretically whatever they wanted. And so instead of these Chromebooks that you guys use that were produced to be the cheaper alternative to expensive laptops, you would just have one company and they could continue to charge $1,300 for a laptop, and you would either have one or you wouldn't. And so, of course, we know that monopolies represent a threat to competition. So, here's where I want to get a little more academic. You see, we are in a country that encourages free enterprise, but we are also in a country that places regulation on businesses. And we are also in a country where the government owns a number of very large businesses and provides a monopoly on those services. For example, natural gas, water. If you live in the city limits, water is a monopoly provided to you by the good folks of Henderson County, as is your sewage, as is your garbage. Those are public utilities. Even in many places, electricity. Because, for example, if you lived up in Cashiers in 1930, there was no electricity. Why? Because it didn't make economic sense for anybody in their right mind to provide electricity for Cashiers in 1930. Why? Because there were like 10 people up there. Okay, I'm exaggerating. Maybe 100 people lived in Cashiers at that time. And it's just not worth it for any company to build a power plant for 100 daggone people. So the government monopolized electricity since everyone uses it, and it made sense. And so electricity was provided during the Great Depression through a law called the Rural Electrification Act to cashiers. And so while it was too expensive to justify up there were plenty of power companies providing power down here because there were more people. But we all equally use electricity. And so, of course, now the academic question is, it's not even academic, it's a practical one. Should healthcare be considered a public utility? You know, that's where the universal payer thing comes in. Area where government regulation is key. So, we still believe in the idea that business is self-regulating. That if you make bad bread, no one buys it, you go out of business, and that's really good for everyone because you want companies to be motivated to make good bread. But we also have regulations. For example, the Food and Drug Administration. They require that companies put accurate labels on their food. You don't want to buy something that says it's one thing and is actually another. That's unsafe. And so, as you know, products can be recalled. Right now we're dealing with a massive nationwide recall of romaine lettuce. And as you know, it would be illegal for any store or restaurant to serve romaine lettuce. It would actually be illegal. And as a result, you're discouraged from buying romaine lettuce. If you eat it and die, that's on you. But if a company claims that it's not romaine lettuce, and then you eat it and die, that's on them. So again, they are required by law to publicly disclose whatever it is they're selling. So lastly, can a company that holds a monopoly really benefit? I mean, electricity is an example of government monopoly. Water, sewage, gas, power, etc. So those are public utilities. Now again, private monopolies historically have shown to be bad, but there are cases where the government holds a public monopoly.